Speaking to you as your officer in charge of Kelowna RCMP Regional Detachment. I want to acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional and unceded territories of the Silks Nation, and that this is a season of change. We enter the fall. We are seeing our youth go back into schools. We're glad to see this cooler weather, and of course the changing of seasons, which I would like to recap this summer as we move forward. So it was a challenging season for all of us as it pertains to the environmental impacts. You'll recall that we started this summer season with a significant heat wave followed by forest fires. Our community went into that summer having to have our officers respond to numerous sudden deaths and check well-being files that were particularly challenging. Terrible conditions, hot, unventilated, and difficult files for those families impacted by those heat waves. And I want to thank our wildfire service and our fire departments for all the work that they did on our fires, particularly here in our region. We saw Dilworth, West Side Road, Glenmore, Joe Rich, incredible response. But also, I want to take this moment to thank our police officers involved. Those police officers are not often thought of as first response in wildfire, and yet they are many times the first ones to the call. They're responsible for evacuation, security, traffic control, safety, and egress from the locations. Our fires put a lot of strain on our frontline resources and our officers' investigative services this summer as they redeployed from the current and existing mandates that they have to fires, not only in our community but across the province. And many of our police officers gave up their holiday time and their regular time off on their days off to make sure that they could meet the threshold of response that we needed in all of our communities across BC. It was tiresome, and we are grateful for this cooler weather and that we can move forward into fall here. You'll recall at the beginning of the summer, we were responding to a homicide, the homicide of Thomas Chadwick, an impact in our community that has resonated. The accused remains in custody, and he is deeply impacted by mental health conditions. And this has been important in segueing and re-emphasizing the work that we are doing here in Kelowna with our police and crisis team. This is work that is done with specially trained police officers and psychiatric forensic nurses psychiatric nurses, not forensic nurses, psychiatric nurses and trained police officers who work together to respond to people in crisis in our community impacted by mental health and substance abuse. We will continue to advocate for more resources in this area as we move forward, and we see mental health calls climbing in our community and remaining consistent. Our police officers are often the first line of response to mental health calls, and we want to make sure that those files are resourced appropriately where we can with health resources. And you'll notice that we continue to advocate for amendments to the Mental Health Act as the RCMP has appeared before the Special Committee for Police Reform Act. We believe that strong recommendations and changes from this Special Reform Act committee that is responsible for the Police Reform Act will have compelling changes going forward. Our teams are currently focused on disclosure of that homicide. This is a labor-intensive process. There's a lot of investigative steps to bring a file of this level of complexity to a successful conclusion. That file remains very much a priority for our detachment. In July, we want to acknowledge the loss in our community at the beginning of the summer when we saw one of the largest accidents in recent history as it pertains to workplace fatalities. It was an extremely active investigation still, both the criminal investigation of negligence causing death as well as the concurrent WorkSafe BC investigation. We're working closely with WorkSafe BC to make sure that they can conduct their investigation and ensure safe workplaces for all employees across BC in their working conditions. There's a very technical component to this investigation. It's going to take a long time to advance this file and this case. The full findings and determination don't have a clear timeline attached to them, but we're committed to ensuring that the investigational avenues are fully explored in every way. And of course, we cannot talk about this summer without talking about the COVID-19 pandemic. Kelowna RCMP are extremely disappointed and concerned with many that continue to put themselves at risk by refusing to follow the public health orders. As we move forward into the fall, and today marking a day of the new special vaccine passports, which have been adopted in BC. is hopefully a mark forward where we can start to see vaccine rates increasing in our community as high as 80, 90% to see us getting through this pandemic. We, the police, continue to respond to multiple protests per week. We know that in this manner, excuse me, Kelowna RCMP continue to respond to multiple protests per week. And we know that there's a charter protected right for people to protest. However, this does not stop individuals from in our community from, we know that there's a charter protected right to peaceful protest. However, this does not interfere with other people's right to health and safety within our community. When we think about those who have been infected by this outbreak, who have been impacted by COVID-19, it is our job collectively as a community to come together and make sure that we are safe going forward. For those who continue to flaunt the current health directions, the newly initiated vaccine passport, or any of the public health orders, we will continue to utilize all of our powers to address this through community safety. This includes our criminal code authorities for fraud, assault, mischief, cause disturbance, or uttering threats. There's also powers from the public health orders which allow us to lay fines and enforce those important health regulations. To date, Kelowna RCMP has laid close to $10,000 in fines. This is our community. We're going to get through this pandemic when we come together to raise our vaccine numbers and to support our local economy. Your local businesses are trying to stay afloat and survive through this pandemic. We need your patience and respect. The provincial and federal laws are there to keep us safe. The Kelowna RCMP will take calls from any citizens or businesses that are unable to operate due to those who are flagrantly disobeying the public health orders or uttering threats. We're getting closer to the end of this now, and it's not the time to lose our fight. We must focus on respecting and protecting each other as this resurgence and wave of the pandemic moves forward with local outbreaks. August was a very tough month for the Kelowna RCMP detachment and Kelowna as a community when we were faced with unprecedented escalation in violence for organized crime activities in Kelowna. The incident put our community at risk. It was a brazen daytime attack in a busy part of town. The IED marked a substantial threat for those in the area and interrupted busy economic time for those businesses. The incident was handled extremely well by our police officers who identified the risk early, evacuated the area, and took steps to make that area safe. The investigation is ongoing, and we continue to work with our Combined Forces Special Enforcement Unit on this investigation. So as we work to advance some of these complex issues that Kelowna has been faced with, we're going to focus on the fall and how we can move forward as a police detachment. Resourcing plans, which create processes to maximize efficiencies and make sure that we are using our current resources over a multi-year resource plan most effectively, planning and predicting what resources we require next so that the community in Kelowna can respond to those needs. We continue to partner on the Kelowna Community Safety Plan, which was designed to form a basis for a multi-pronged systems-based approach to improve community safety. It intends to generate shared ownership, vision, and action for our government, systems, ministries, and organizations that contribute to community safety. This is important work for me, and I believe deeply in it. We're diving into our work on the Kelowna RCMP 3-year strategic plan, advancing some of the initiatives we set out to achieve prior to the summer and have maintained throughout the summer, but are putting more of a focus on a forward action plan this fall, which includes reducing property crime, ensuring safety in our public spaces, and earning the trust of citizens who have experienced persons crime. You'll remember that we also have a strategic enabler, which includes showing up at our best for everyone in our community. And this leads us into a leadership symposium, the first ever for our Kelowna RCMP detachment, which is important training and leadership for all of our supervisors, all the way through to our senior leaders on areas such as performance management, mental health and wellness, and conduct. We have our EDI committee and the outcomes from the EDI committee that are starting to take into effect, including our most important partnership coming up this month with our local Indigenous groups to recognize the Truth and Reconciliation Day that is a new national statutory holiday for Canada, but an important day to recognize the truth and reconciliation that must be done with our Indigenous communities and in partnership with all of the ministries that provide services within the Kelowna regional area for our detachment. And as we committed to working in the fall with Kelowna Pride Society, we are moving forward with our detachment safe place training for all of our frontline officers. This work has been continuing since I last presented to you in March on this, and we will continue to provide updates at our next November report to Council. I had the opportunity to throw the first pitch at UBCO on Friday night at the Heat softball game, their first home game. It was a tie game, but it was a wonderful opportunity to speak to the UBCO students there and to have an important connection with that community. We're following closely, and I will present the special purpose committee on the police. I will present to the special purpose committee on the Police Reform Act this fall, which we anticipate will have important recommendations on policing, mental health, policing standards, and training as we go forward this year. So that's a little look at this fall for us. The next report to council that I will be putting forward publicly will be in November. Do you have any questions?
How much of a strain are you expecting this vaccine card rollout to put on your resources?
At this point, our police officers have been responding to a lot of calls for service already on public health orders. We work in cooperation with other provincial agencies, such as the medical health officers, and local agencies, such as our bylaw enforcement officers. And we've already been responding to a lot of protests. So I'm not anticipating a severe spike in calls. However, we will be monitoring this week by week.
Can you give us an idea of like how many calls a day you get on that kind of
I don't have those stats available, but I could certainly look to respond to that through our media relations officer.
Some of these demonstrations that are happening, the anti-vaccine and the like, that the city hall last week was less attended, let's say. Was that because of the fines that were handed out, or do you have any explanation of that?
I certainly hope that enforcement measures are making an impact within our community, but what I truly hope is that people are becoming compliant, increasing vaccine rates within our community, and taking measures to be safer.
The comments you made about the vaccine passports going forward, it didn't have the tone that the members would be conciliatory and, you know, dealing with some people who are opposed to these rules in a let's talk about it kind of a way. It sounded pretty forceful. That's the approach you're choosing to take?
So my position on this is if a business feels that they are under threats or they're unable to lawfully operate their business, we need to be able to respond and ensure their safety. This has been an economically tough time for all Canadians who have local or who have their own businesses when it comes to the COVID pandemic. And what I really want to say about our approach going forward is that we will be ensuring safety for everyone in businesses, ensuring that patrons can access premises who want to lawfully access a premise and access services, that they are vaccinated and complying with public health orders, that they have a safe space in which to go and access services in our community.
So your members won't likely be standing in a restaurant discussing the pros and cons of vaccines with people who choose to dispute the validity of these passports?
Each situation needs to be looked at and reviewed on its own merits. We need to make a risk assessment at the time, but what I can tell you is we have the full powers of the criminal code to enforce what we need to, whether that be cause disturbance, uttering threats, fraud. We've heard of scams where individuals are wanting to call ahead to businesses and order multiple meals and then put this business in a position where they could financially have to prepare a bunch of meals and then walk away and dine and dash, essentially, is that crime, theft. These are not tolerable. The public test of tolerance for this at this point is very low. We need to get this pandemic behind us. We need to make sure that we are all working together as a community, and we need to make sure that this is a safe place for people to operate their businesses and for patrons to be able to access those services.
So if someone does that, orders the food, maybe fraud, what is the repercussions? How easy is it going to be to charge them? This would be a criminal charge. What are they facing?
As with any investigation like this, we look at the totality of this to make sure that it meets the elements of the offense. Each one will have to be looked at differently. The ones that I'm referring to are ones that were forwarded to us from a page on Facebook. So I don't have the elements of the offense in those ones, but as an officer responds, they go, they gather information, they attain the details, and then analyze what charge that might be. Perhaps it's fraud, it might be theft, In other cases, have been calls of uttering threats or disturbances within businesses. Those are really important because they affect our safety in our public spaces and, of course, the businesses that are trying to operate in lawful manners compliant with the public health orders.
But what's the repercussions of uttering a threat or a fraud? Are we talking, just as a slap on the wrist, could you get jail time, fines?
It's the nature of the threat. So if you're going to utter a threat and it's got serious violence attached to it, the courts are going to look at that much differently than uttering threats to a lesser degree. Those would be collected, the information would be forwarded to our public prosecution service. The public prosecution service would then analyze that information, assess if there's charge approval, and forward that through to the courts for a judge to make the determination.
And you said that you issued over $10,000 worth of fines. Do you have any idea of how many people have been fined to these individuals? And have there been charges laid of assault or any of these other kinds of charges you've just been fined so far?
So far, just fines. We've had arrests in cases that have involved disturbances in businesses. However, at this point, fines are the only charges that we have going forward. And that's something that our media relations officer, I've heard from a couple of people, would be valuable information, is how many calls we're receiving with respect to the public health orders, as well as the nature of those. So we will provide some details there. Yes.
You mentioned protests and people being able to safely access services. We've seen very large protests in front of the hospital and then regular ones in front of the Interior Health Building. And people are saying that they feel intimidated and threatened when they try to go to these places. Will the RCMP do anything different to try to help people get into those buildings?
Anybody having a tough time accessing medical services, health services, or any essential services during a time when a protest is happening, please call the RCMP. We want to receive your call and make sure you can safely get to your location. You should not be subject of lateral violence, any sort of threats, and or not being able to pass through crowds to get to the essential services that you need. Our healthcare workers have had a heck of a time through this pandemic, and it is our job to make sure that they are supported, that we can get back to providing the healthcare that needs to be provided in our community, and that we work together collaboratively. This is all hands on deck when it comes to getting through this pandemic.
So would that mean like providing escorts through an angry crowd?
Absolutely. If somebody needs essential services, we will escort them through an angry crowd. Where necessary, we will effect arrests. We've been fortunate thus far to be able to manage our crowds through the very skilled and trained investigators. We are lucky in Kelowna to have some excellent resources when it comes to crowd control and protest management. And those police officers come to us with a lot of training in these areas, and it is our job to strike a balance between the charter-protected right to use their voice and protest, as well as balance the rights and needs of citizens. Essential service and healthcare is a right for a citizen, and if they need to get into a building and there's a crowd blocking that, we will take the appropriate measures to help them get there.
When you first took over at the detachment, it was a place that was riddled with officers that were facing a number of code of conduct investigations, often involving sex offenses. Do you feel that you've been successful in trying to change the culture of this detachment?
I think it's too early at this point, 10 months in, to be able to speak to culture change. However, what I'd like to say is that we have dedicated, our leadership team is committed to culture change, ensuring that everybody is showing up at their best for every citizen, that we are providing our supervisors and our leaders with the skills and tools that they need for training, for education, how to intervene with conduct at an earliest opportunity possible and prevent any additional concerns or escalation as they move forward.
How many officers here are currently under a code of conduct investigation?
I won't be able to provide the exact numbers to that today. I don't have that prepared for you.
You talked about the specifics of crowd control and the training that goes in for officers. You know, 1,500 people are outside of KGH. There are people who are having difficulties accessing the building. There didn't seem to be, you know, a lot of interaction with the RCMP. Obviously, they were there. Can you talk to us about the strategy when you're faced with a challenge like that?
Yeah, so at that point, it's a management of a large volume of people. And frankly, despite our intelligence gathering work and our criminal analysts acquiring as much information as they could ahead of time, we didn't have a sense of the true picture of numbers that were there. So we adequately staffed that situation. However, an event of that scale requires a magnitude of planning in which we were planning for all scenarios, from the numbers that we saw there that day to minimum numbers. And so you begin to surge in additional resources, pulling in resources that are on their current mandates and priorities and shifting them onto that proactive mandate of crowd control and policing these large groups of people. It's challenging. In these situations, you can begin to arrest one person, two people, three people at a time. However, that can create in itself a whole nother set of risk for not only the crowd that's there, but the people trying to access the essential services and the police on scene, requiring extensive resource plans, which frankly are exhaustive for the Kelowna RCMP detachment to be able to manage while we respond to contract policing and all of the needs that our community has for community safety.
Would you say that they're talking today about more demonstrations in Vancouver, Victoria, possibly here? If something were to evolve again of those nature, I mean, this has been going on for almost, 18 months.
Yeah.
It's not new. The Saturday rallies, those kinds of things must be very challenging and frustrating.
It is, and it's the obligation of the police to take somewhat of a neutral response when people are protesting. However, there is a balance between what is lawful and what isn't. At what laws are of higher threshold versus lower threshold? Which ones are we enforcing on that moment, and where does the charter fall in relation to provincial orders, bylaw orders, anything of that nature? We have to continually assess risk and plan for and adapt accordingly.
Do you adjust yourself when you run into the same individuals time and again?
Yes, absolutely. Individuals who have come across our attention multiple times for events, they are first provided whenever we're dealing with protest events, whether it be this COVID or other ones in our community. We seek first to educate, to inform, and then we move into enforcement action, and from there it becomes a level of tolerance as to what level of enforcement we would take. So when we are dealing with people who have been educated and informed and advised multiple times, at that point there is clearly no other alternative other than an enforcement approach.
Would that include tickets, or how would you describe that? I'm thinking of a couple of individuals I see all the time at these rallies. I assume that they have been spoken to at the very least. I don't know if ticketing is effective. Can you talk to that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's been repeat individuals who have been ticketed in this COVID pandemic, throughout the COVID pandemic, who've received thousands of dollars of fines.
But have they paid?
Pardon me?
Have they paid the fine?
I can't speak to that. Unfortunately, that is a question you'll need to turn to the courts. Any additional questions? I'm going to take two more questions.
You talked about how you want to see changes to the Mental Health Act, or like how how police respond to mental health. Can you just kind of give us a summary on like what exactly what do you want to change?
So of course, as Kelowna RCMP detachment officer in charge, I don't have control over those changes, but if I was to see an enhancement in this area, it would be something that would allow police not to be the first responders to mental health. We are not in the field of health. We are in the field of crisis response or frontline response, and we would like to see these calls first and foremost responded to by health services. And so changes could look a whole myriad of different ways, but we certainly want to see those changes be first staffed by health officers.
This might be somewhat redundant, but I'm hammering enough. If there's a disturbance related to these passports at a restaurant or another venue, what sort of response will people expect from the RCMP?
Yeah, so if people are not safe in that premise or businesses are not able to lawfully operate, you can expect the police to show up and respond to enforcement through the Criminal Code of Canada. So that is cause disturbance, uttering threats, fraud, mischief for the lawful use and enjoyment of property. Businesses have the right to operate safely. People have the right to access those premises safely and in compliance with the public health orders.
So they'd be escorted out if they weren't going to...
Absolutely, and they could be facing charges, criminal charges, and or violation fines under the public health orders. We also have bylaw tickets that they can be laid on those individuals. Last question, anyone?
Is there an update on the investigation that the RCMP initiated with the man who was allegedly threatening the security guard at the vaccine clinic?
Yeah, thank you. So that incident and the actions that led up to that incident are deplorable. This is the racist comments that were made at the vaccine clinic located at Trinity Baptist Church. And what I can tell you is that statements have been obtained in that case. That case is being looked at for the threshold of a hate crime. That threshold is extremely high, a national test of extremely high threshold. And so what we're doing here is making sure we have all of the evidence we can gather in this and putting forth the best case possible. This is not a case that our police officers would investigate daily, and so it's one that has required significant collaboration with the BC Prosecution Service and a little bit more time to ensure we're putting the right package forward to the BC Prosecution Service. It is still an active investigation going forward to the BC Prosecution Service.
Do you anticipate there will be a recommendation of charges to the prosecution service?
I anticipate that our police officers will put forward charges on this case to the BC Prosecution Service. Thank you very much. Does anybody need photographs for still?